Well, I was just going to point to population, right? So I think we don't need to labour the point on the supply and demand thing. I think everyone kind of knows there's not enough houses being built. Well, just in case they don't know, building approvals are at record lows. There's less houses being built today than ever before. There was already a housing shortage. There's builders that have been going bust. There are not enough houses, static, and not enough being built, progress. So it's actually an issue that is getting worse, not better, but it's already bad. So we've got that as an underlying layer. Now, one of the things that I'll just point out, I'm not going to give away all of our secrets, but one of the things that does have a big impact, a significant impact on property prices is population change. And so the rate of change, both the rate and the volume of change matter when it comes to population as it relates to property prices. Now, you've got to remember as well, property prices don't exist at something like a Sydney level. They don't even exist at something like a Bondi level. They exist on a really small micro grid, right? And so what you can actually find is even in, so I'll come back to that point. First and foremost, people moving places is going to be a huge driver. So we've covered some of the other ones like affordability, jobs, lifestyle, affordability, all this kind of stuff. But then also people going places, which might sound pretty simple, right? Yeah. That's the demand side going to meet the supply side. But there's a strong correlation between population growth and population movement and volume and rate of change and property prices. It's significant. And so it's something that's worth paying attention to. So then you get to think about how and where people are moving. So in some cases, the capital cities are tending to fill up with new immigrants. That tends to be a common pattern. It's not absolutely true, but it can be generally true. And the way that tends to work is that the capital cities tend to, I say tend to because this isn't an absolute rule, tend to fill up with migrants like a reservoir. They come in from overseas because they don't know where to go, so they go to the capitals. And then over a period of a few years, they filter out to the rest of the country. That tends to be the movement pattern. That movement pattern existed well before COVID, so the exodus to the regionals was already fully in flow before COVID. That was already happening. That wasn't a COVID thing. That was already existing. Got accelerated by COVID, but it was already existing. So that trend still continues. But then also you have intra LGA migration, which is also really, really interesting, right? And so when you actually start to get down to like a really granular level and start looking at LGAs and suburbs, you can also see how population movement within even small locations, not just macro, is everyone moving to Queensland, but like within an LGA, how that can change things as well. And that also can tie back to things like affordability. So one of the things we've noticed, for example, just to bring this down to a micro, is even in some of the LGAs that we're buying in, you'll have higher priced, sort of more blue chip areas and lower priced, more affordable areas and stuff like that. What we're actually seeing, broadly speaking, is that the exodus to affordable lifestyle that's been a driver for the last 3 years, right? And so that is still a core driver. And we're actually seeing intra-LGA migration affecting property markets more locally than ever before, which is really, really interesting. And it also points to one other thing I'll say before I shut up and let you guys get a word in edgeways because I can waffle on a little bit.
No, this update's probably the best one we've had in a while. So me and Grant have been saying the same things too many times over. This is new and refreshing. We're excited. Keep going.
Benchmark's so high now, Charlie.
Yeah, I know, right?
So one of the things that COVID did to the Australian property market is it made it move as a homogenous, unified market. Probably the only time in history that has ever happened. So what that meant was, broadly speaking, all markets kind of did the same thing. And to that degree, pretty much, and lots of investors experience this, you could pretty much buy a property anywhere and make money. That's because, broadly speaking, what COVID did was it completely made the market go in a really weird way. Broadly speaking, all moved in the same direction. That is, I cannot express how freakish that is compared to how markets generally move. That was like a complete anomaly. Now, what we're actually seeing is a reversion to how markets normally move, which is in a hyper-localized fashion. And so I think part of what is going on as well is that people are kind of freaking out because they're like, wait a second, the market's doing all of this crazy stuff now. And it's like, no, it's doing the normal things. You just didn't pay attention to it when it was doing normal things in the past. And so the fact that property markets are moving in a hyper-localized fashion is specifically far more normal than anything we experienced during the kind of COVID boom. And this is also points, again, to one kind of final point that I want to make on this thread, that one of the bigger overarching impacts on the property market is, in fact, consumer sentiment. So I've said this again time and time again. Psychographics move markets far more than demographics or statistics ever will. And so understanding how people feel is going to make a bigger impact on how different markets move. And so we see that at the moment with low stock levels. So the stock levels at the moment are like 40% lower than they were 6 months ago or something like that. And also in many, many locations, the lowest they've been in 17 years. Now, if interest rates going up, we're going to cause everyone to have a fire sale, wouldn't stock levels be going up? Wouldn't that make more sense? Well, in fact, that is not happening. And the reason that is not happening is because people are freaking out and they're like, oh, it's a bad time to sell. People don't need to sell because they can hold on to the properties. And so there's less stock currently available on the market based on how people are thinking and feeling, despite the fact that in many, at least, I don't know if it's statistically most, so I'll just caution myself there, but in a significant amount of locations, property prices are still going up. And even in the locations where prices are going up, right? And objectively speaking, it might be a really fantastic time to sell because prices are like getting quite high. Sellers are still concerned and saying, I think that this is a bad time to sell because they're hearing negative news media based around places like Sydney and Melbourne. And so this psychographic overlay can be really counterintuitive to how the market is actually moving. So I'll say that again, just in case people didn't catch it. Even in locations where property prices are moving steeply upwards and rental demand is at an all-time high and objectively speaking, markets are in a fantastic position, sellers are still convinced that it might be a bad time to sell because they're being spooked by the media and that's affecting consumer sentiment. This then exacerbates the supply and demand issue, which creates more tightening, which creates more pressure, which moves markets more. So it kind of feeds into itself a little bit there.
It kind of reminds me of the whole idea of like we've got a supply problem with property, yet we keep moving interest rates up, which is causing less supply to come into the market. It's kind of like counterintuitive, which will push market prices up as well.
All right, fellow property investor. If you loved the value from this short video and wanted to know more about how you can win at property investing, check out the full episode by clicking the link on your screen or in the description right now. Alternatively, click subscribe and you'll never miss another one of these videos.